Good deal. Can you hear us online? Jim, can you hear us? Kenny, can you hear us?
Those computer stuff in Arizona.
Oh, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
But they called, it wasn't us.
Yeah.
Should be coming through there, right?
Yeah, they play back.
It's so much
But the owls do all around the heavy liftings.
Yeah.
thick, it really is. Not much you can do about it.
Yeah.
The past probably 10 years, I've been getting emails saying that the line is right there. Oh, it is? Yeah.
I gotta go to some show.
Okay.
I just, I'm sticking
We
to it.
had wings at dinner.
Oh, they did?
Yeah.
Yeah, I know, yeah.
There we go.
But anyway, they say that every one of them.
All right, Kenny and Jim, can you hear us
They've taken
okay?
over my machine and,
Did you start the Zoom
they
call and
keep
walk
on saying
away?
it every day, you know.
Do I have to, but I want to mute myself
Well,
here,
I'm
don't I?
contacted.
Yeah, I can see the activity there in the corner. It's hearing you.
FBI.
All right.
They're just not,
And I said,
Not
well,
there
what can
yet.
I do?
Yeah.
although,
It's coming from
I say that.
China, Afghanistan, or somehow I wish maybe that I could set it up so I don't want any emails coming from anywhere outside of the United States. But I don't know if they got any do.
All right.
One thing I'd like for it to do is say,
Got it. And then,
There's someone.
a valid email address. And just send them emails out. I can do that as a program,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
they're not.
You found it?
Okay, we found the,
Everything in the notes. Mine, this is my note. This is Kenny's stuff that shows up.
Calvin State Director's office. Specific stores, and they're ready for U.S. tourists.
Ford, the big buses coming and buying them.
It's got to be done on the sleeve.
Right.
This is supposed to be more important. Which she said she's from. But that's across all of North Carolina. It's 10,000.
Charlie unit. 1%.
Oh,
How you doing?
fine, all right. Yeah.
Good, good.
You ever played? Got 4 more people coming online. Good deal. All.
Years and years and years ago.
Who played?
We did? Okay.
Okay, I'm gonna stop sharing.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
See who's all here.
I'm from Sony years ago. And we played there.
All right, you can hear us online okay? Jim, you can hear us okay?
I can. Kathy will be unable to be with us today, unfortunately.
All right.
Some kind of a yeah. Played a couple in a row. You still playing good, aren't you? Starting to suffer. I got off the course just before 3 o'clock.
A little bit more time. Becky, you gonna join us tonight?
I'm lying.
It's been
She
almost
just
4
got-
hours now.
I'm sorry. So are you going on the strip clubs? I'm just interested in the hearing, just because it's geography. Good for you. Okay, what am I looking at here?
Yes.
Now, there's a tight one between this and Elijah. Well, it's interesting stuff, because history and geography are, think about all the things that have happened in the world in the last 2,000 years have been affected by
This little piece of land.
it's around the size of Rhode Island.
Caesarea is. Caesarea is.
Another one coming on?
You know, the more you
Yeah,
understand, the
I
better
think it's
you
about writing here,
figure out why people are doing something like that.
right
I
there.
don't know if you'd understand the why, at least understand the background of where it's coming from.
Everybody wants to.
It helps you form your own opinion.
Yeah,
That's the problem.
that's, I take a view and walk it over.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. A lot of fun.
Enjoy yourself.
So what did you think about last week with Rachel here? I thought she did a really good job. And she gave us a glimpse of the complexity of the dynamics over there. I like what she said about, if you've been here for a week, you can write a book. Been here for a year, you can write an article. 9 years, you can write maybe a sentence. Yeah, it's pretty complex, isn't it? So we're gonna muddle through this together. The guy that we have from the JCC, his name is Noah, and he is coming next Wednesday. He has just returned from Israel. And so all the stuff going on there with the Supreme Court and other skirmishes going on, he'll be able to give us an up-to-date feel for it as well. Any other comments, something that you took away from Rachel's presentation?
Yeah, the complexity. I mean, we're talking about, we think we have a complex world here. And think about what the heck's going on there.
Yeah.
They've got more. I mean, if we get rid of the Speaker of the House, they're worried about their Supreme Court.
The whole Supreme Court.
Yeah, the whole Supreme Court.
Yeah. And our Speaker of the House has never happened before, so that's
It's different.
we're getting into some new category there too. We are also going to have those who go to Jordan, Amman. We're going to have dinner with her. And we're going to try to schedule that and have a chance for her to meet her face to face.
No, she was very, very good.
Yeah.
And she was very good about not getting political. She was very good about being civic. No, she was very, very capable.
You know what I've heard from her, that I've heard from so many people, is that they begin as American Protestants that are Zionists. That is, Israel is entitled to this land, and biblically and politically and all that, and very much pro-Israel. They get over there, they're not anti-Israel, but they're able to see the greater impact of what's going on over there. So I've seen that often, just kind of a shift, more of a balance perhaps. So we'll
So what's the biblical view? What's the Bible? If you just read the Bible and believe the Bible for what it just plainly says, what's the takeaway? I mean, God promised that land to the Israelites, and through Abraham and through Moses, and dividing it among the tribes. And of course, now 10 of the tribes are carried away into slavery and sort of disappeared. And we're looking at the remnant of what's left, and the dispersion, and then the call back, and so many people that look at Israel as they're ready to pick up, uproot wherever they are and move there.
When did they cease becoming a nation? We know when it kind of came back together in 1947, 48. Did they ever? I gotta think about this. I know a lot of biblical history, but because they weren't a country during the Roman occupation, they were a puppet state, and then after that,
But then Rome got fed up, and that's when they went in and tore down the temple in AD 70, is that right? I mean, it was
70,
just-
yeah.
They reached their limit, Rome reached their limit, and.
Yeah,
But
So,
things like being in the Ottoman Empire, there was no nation state in the Ottoman Empire time.
you're just part of the Ottoman Empire,
You're just part of the
the
Ottoman.
Byzantine Empire.
Yeah,
So maybe, you know, for over 1,000 years,
well, and. you
almost
have-
2,000 years.
Yeah, and you have the British who got in there. After World War I, the British got in there, and they created whatever they wanted to do, and they've made a mess of a lot of places.
But I guess they didn't have their independent state at that time.
No.
either.
well, so what does Revelation say as far as end times? I mean, we know there's Armageddon and a great battle and all these other kinds of things. Is there anything else that would give us a clue as to what God's purpose or plans
Yeah.
are? I mean, that's,
You know, when you get to Revelation, it's not so much talking about this physical land of Israel, but it is talking about the return of God's people. You know, Revelation 22 talks about the return, but not the return to this, the return back into the very presence of God.
spiritually.
Yeah, spiritually, into the Garden of Eden, almost metaphorically, in which we, returning into that ideal state from which Adam and Eve were tossed out. So I don't know if it has a whole lot, and certainly the Jewish people have this strong affinity towards the land. It's the land. Biblically speaking, that's certainly the covenant that God made with Abraham and reaffirmed with Moses. I don't see a whole lot of that in the New Testament. You think of any parts there?
No, because they were heading out to the Gentiles. They were dragging the Gentiles in as fast as they could,
Yeah, but not to the state.
not to the state.
Yeah,
They were going out.
yeah.
And that's not the Jewish tradition. The Jewish tradition is much more family, corporate.
All right. We're going to take a look here. I want to do a little bit of a running start. If you've got your maps, you can see where we ended up last time. So, Capernaum is on the very north part of the Sea of Galilee, or Lake Tiberias up there. That's where we talked about last week, and that's really where Jesus grew up. Born in Bethlehem, early years in Nazareth, but really in his adult life, the northern part, Capernaum. And that's where the call of the disciples were. We talked about that last week. A little further, in the same area, now we're going to head more towards the southern part of the Sea of Galilee, with a couple of other, here we go, right. All right, so on this, this was day 5. After lunch, Capernaum is closely associated with Jesus and his ministry as described in the Gospels. There we see the house of mother-in-law of Peter, we never hear about his wife though. Mother-in-law of Peter, we don't know what happened there. And an ancient synagogue. After lunch of St. Peter's Fish, we drive to Tabgha on the Sea of Galilee where Jesus fed the 5,000. We will then visit the site known as Peter's Primacy, where Jesus appears to the disciples for a third time after the resurrection, later to the Mount of Beatitudes. So now we're going towards the southern part of this lake of Tiberias, Sea of Galilee. We did Mary Magdalene, we did the significance of, and here is the feeding of the 5,000. This is also right around there on Sea of Galilee. Now, interesting thing about the feeding of the 5,000, it is the only miracle, perhaps outside of the resurrection, And I'll even add the resurrection, because in Mark's gospel, the earliest versions, there is no resurrection. It was a later addition. So I'll make this claim that it's the only miracle that's in all 4 of the gospels. When you think about raising of Lazarus, it's only in 1. When you think about his miraculous birth, that's only 2. But the feeding of the 5,000, so there's something really important about this that we need to kind of figure out. So here it is. This is from John's Gospel. From John's Gospel. When Jesus looked up and saw a great crowd coming toward him, he said to Philip, "Where should we buy bread for these people?" You know, I like the next phrase. He asked this only to test him, for he already had in mind what he was going to do. I mean, just so that you know that he knows that you know that he knows that he's the Messiah. He wasn't saying, "Gosh, Philip, what are we going to do here with all these people?" Philip answered him, "It would take more than a half a year's wages to buy enough bread for each one to have a bite. And that's hardly going to be enough for dinner." Another of his disciples, Andrew, Simon Peter's brother, spoke up. "Here's a boy with 5 small barley loaves and 2 fish. But how far will that go among so many?" So, again, details matter. He doesn't just have 5 loaves of bread, 5 small, as barley. And barley was the poor man's wheat. Wheat bread was the good stuff. Barley was kind of the crude, poor man's, whatever's left over. And so think in terms of don't think of a hoagie. Think in terms of a Twinkie. That'll help you, won't it, Terry? Twinkie, good. He's got 5 of them. And 2 fish, probably dried out fish. He doesn't have a couple of wiggling fish in his pocket here. So all he's got is that. And Jesus said, "Have the people sit down." There was plenty of grass in that place, and they sat down, about 5,000 men. So we don't know how many women. So when you say the feeding of the 5,000, that's only counting half the gender. Then Jesus took the loaves, gave thanks, and distributed to those who were seated as much as they wanted. He did the same with the fish. When they had all had enough to eat, he said to the disciples, "Gather the pieces that are left over. Let nothing be wasted." So they gathered them and filled up 12 baskets with the pieces of the 5 barley loaves left over by those who had eaten. It is a miracle. Couple of things in here. I remember at seminary, my professors trained under, this was in the 80s. So my professors, probably when they were going through seminary in the 40s or 50s, they trained under this German theologian whose name was Rudolf Bultmann. Rudolf Bultmann. This will not be on the test, so you just listen to this for your pleasure. Rudolf Bultmann, a German theologian in the early 1900s, came up with something called demythologizing the Bible. And in this very liberal, intellectual, German-led theology in the early 1900s, what he was doing was taking away the mythology. Now, mythology does not mean that it's untrue. It means it's a way of telling the truth. So, you have Aesop's fables of the tortoise and the hare. Now, was there really a tortoise and was there really a hare who had a race? And Slow and Steady won the race? Probably not. That's the myth part. But the truth is Slow and Steady. wins the race. So Bultmann used that same kind of thinking and used it to take a look at Scripture. Was it a virgin birth? Bultmann would say, probably not, but the truth is that this was a way to elevate a person above mere mortals. Even some of the Caesars claimed a virgin birth. Did he actually walk on water? Probably not, but it really kind of tells the truth that this Jesus had some supernatural abilities. Even went to the resurrection. Was it a physical resurrection? Bultmann would say, probably not. But the idea that his message of love and forgiveness and compassion and service, these would all live on in his, and that's what was resurrected. That's what continued on after the death of Jesus. So that was the early 1900s. Now, for a lot of part, that has been rejected, even though there is still a society called the Jesus Society that continues to debunk the miracles of the Bible and really use them to reveal what they say is the true truth. So, it's a little bit of background, because one explanation for the true truth of this story is right there, and a boy had 5 small barley loaves and 2 fish. The idea is that Jesus brings this boy up to all of 5,000 people and says, do we have any food? I guess nobody has any food, huh? Maybe you say, no, I don't have any food. And this boy comes forward and gives everything he has. Everything he has. And as they're distributing everything he has, well, people are saying, well, I also brought a loaf of bread that I could throw into the hot. I've got a few other fish here in this pocket too. Because none of these people would have gone out to this hillside to listen to this preacher without bringing something to eat. They never would have done it. And so it was the shaming of these people by this little boy giving everything that enabled them to have generous hearts and share what they brought. Rudolf Bultmann. That's one explanation. Let's put that one aside.
So can I just ask you, how did you guys as a class respond to Bultmann's teachings?
Oh, by the mid-'80s, we were rejecting them.
Entirely?
Well, we liked the truth that came out of it, but to get there, you have to reject the any kind of supernatural miracle. He rejected any kind of supernatural miracle. But again, my teachers cut their teeth on Bultmann.
Yeah. Then you're rejecting the resurrection. I mean,
Right.
the bodily resurrection, which is the whole core state. I mean,
Yeah. So at some point, that was our argument in seminary. At some point, that whole Bultmann approach breaks down. Now, Jesus says, a man went from Jerusalem down to Jericho and was jumped by thieves and left for dead. Now, did a man actually go from Jerusalem to Jericho and jump by thieves? I don't know. Could have. But the truth of it is not found in the historicity of it. The truth is found that the Samaritan stops, of all people. And if he can stop, we can serve the other people. You can even push that to Jonah and the whale. And say, was there actually a physical whale that swallowed a physical prophet named Jonah? Maybe, maybe not. But the truth of that story is not found in a physical whale. The truth of that story is that God doesn't take no for an answer. When God says, go to Nineveh, to that great city, Well, God's will be done, and God will save and go outside the Jewish people and save all of God's people. That's where the truth is. So you have to ask the question, where does the truth, when does the truth absolutely found in the historicity? And when is it found in the story? Now, I could say, a man goes to Jerusalem down to Jericho, jump by thief. It's not found in the historicity. It's found in the story. What about a man built, he had so much grain, he built a bigger barn and couldn't even fill up the barns, and that night his soul was required of him. Is that a historicity? That's not what the point is. But at some point, when it comes to the resurrection, this was our argument. If Christ has, this is what Paul says, if Christ has not been raised from the dead, then our faith is in vain. And all we talk about is in vain. So at some point, that Bultmannian kind of theology, I think, falls apart. So on a very, very surface level, this story is about shaming everybody to share what you all have, because there's plenty to go around. And the boy gave us an example. You go a little bit deeper. You go a little bit deeper, and it's probably that traditional understanding that you and I have, that this truly was a miracle. They took a handful of bread and a handful of fish and multiplied it, and everybody was fulfilled. You go a little bit deeper, and there's probably something more to this story. Let me retell the story. He took the bread, gave thanks, broke it, and he gave it to his disciples and told them to distribute it. In the early church, part of the communion symbolism was the fish. This is probably has some sacramental communion images going on in here. Not only as Jesus is taking the loaves, gave thanks, and distributed, but at the end, they gathered up a whole lot of baskets. No, not a whole lot of baskets. How many baskets?
Wow.
That's gotta mean something, right? When we take about the 12 tribes. So it's not much. It's a little bread, it's a little fish. But you know what? It's enough. It's enough to feed the hungry people. And it's enough to gather up 12 basketfuls, one for all the tribes of Israel. So there's a lot of different layers to this individual miracle in all of the Gospels. So we'll go to that site. We'll go to that site with we'll have a little bread and wine while we're there. I probably won't multiply it though. All right? Now, just a little south of that is Peter's primacy. This is after the resurrection. After the resurrection, Jesus appears to the disciples in the locked upper room. That's down in Jerusalem. Of course, that's where he died. The disciples are hanging out. But then, after the resurrection, the disciples really didn't know what to do. And so they scattered. And most of them went back to what they knew what they were doing, fishing. So, here is after the resurrection. Then the disciples whom Jesus loved said to Peter, whoops, we jumped one here. Go back. I have to take a look at this. I think I missed one of the. Primacy of Peter. This is what I want. It jumped ahead. Whoops, now I have to. Gotta go to Zoom, gotta share screen. That's what I want. And then I go here. After Jesus appeared again to the disciples by the Sea of Galilee, it happened this way, right? You see the distance there. They've left Jerusalem down the south. They're going back up to their hometowns up in Sea of Galilee. Simon Peter, Thomas, known as Didymus, Nathanael from Cana in Galilee, and the sons of Zebedee, and 2 other disciples. About 8. I'm going fishing, Simon Peter told them, and they said, we'll go with you. So they went out and got a boat, but that night they caught nothing. So when Peter says, I'm going fishing, it's not like he's going to get a cane pole and a bobber, some worms and a 6-pack, and hope that the fish don't disturb you. This is commercial fishing, right? This is going back to his old self again, where Jesus found him. Same place, he's going back to his epicenter here. And as is the tradition, they oftentimes fish at night. Fish at night. Could be they're biting, it could be the heat of the day, whatever. Good. But they're out all night long and they catch nothing. Early in the morning, Jesus stood on the shore, but the disciples did not realize it was Jesus. He called out to them, friends, catching anything? I mean, we do that, right? We see a fisherman over there at the ocean or at the lake. Got any fish? How they bite you? No, they answered. He said, throw your net on the right side of the boat and you will find some. Right as opposed to not the left. Not right as opposed to the correct one. When they did this, they were unable to haul the net in because of the large number of fish. Immediately. What does that remind you of? The call, right? They're at the same place. They're in the same boats. They're fishing the same. And once again,
Well, it's another act of creation, or at least demonstration of ability to control those kind of things.
then the disciple whom Jesus loved. Who's that?
John, who's writing this?
Yeah, who's writing it? Because he's too humble to say his own name. Then the disciple whom Jesus loved said to Peter, it's the Lord. As soon as Simon Peter heard this, him saying it is the Lord, he wrapped his outer garment around him, for he had taken it off and jumped into the water. Isn't that weird? He wrapped, they only have 2 articles of clothing typically on. They've got that inner one, which is just kind of almost of a diaper that they kind of wrap around, and then they've got their tunic over it. So it's really it's 2. And evidently, when you're fishing, you take off that outer one, maybe it encumbers you, maybe it's too hot, maybe you don't want to get it dirty with fish, whatever, that is off. Weird thing here, that he puts it on and jumps into the water. Why in the world does he do that? Unless you think I have a good answer to that question, I don't.
But it's detailed, so it's important.
It's important. This is what I think. This is what I think. In Judaism, there is such a high standard of modesty. Nakedness is just kind of shameful. And he knew it was the Lord, and he didn't want to appear before the Lord in that naked state, or near naked state. It was It was an act of honor, respect. Because do you remember when Noah got drunk? After the flood subsided and he made lots of wine, he got drunk, and the three brothers found him naked, passed out in a cave. You would think, shame on you, Noah. Did I say Moses? Noah. Shame on you, Noah. Naked and passed out in a cave. Now the one son saw him naked. Came out and told the two boys. The other two, I think that was Ham. The other two, Shem, from which we get the Semites from, and Japheth, they take a blanket and they walk backwards into the cave and they drop it on the old man. Because the nakedness is not shame on Noah, it's shame on you for seeing my nakedness. See how that works? So my theory, Tal, is that Jesus knows it's the Lord, and for him to come naked would be shame on Jesus. And so he's covering himself up out of modesty and out of respect. That's what I think. All right. The other disciples followed in the boat, towing the net full of fish. They're not going to give up the haul. I mean, it's Jesus, I understand that. But this is a really good haul of fish. For they were not far from shore, about 100 yards. That's kind of a long ways for Peter to swim in with a heavy, with a parka on. When they landed, they saw a fire, of burning coals there with fish on it and some bread. Jesus already has fish. And there's bread. Sounds like the feeding of the 5,000 again? No. It is the basic staple food of this time, so it's not unusual that food is bread and fish. What else do you know about this verse? The details.
153.
Well, we're not there yet.
Okay.
Oh, jump ahead here.
Oh.
Burning coals. We like a good bonfire in the backyard like anybody else. And it gets particularly good when the coals are just our embers are. But it takes time, doesn't it? It takes time for all that wood to burn down and create those coals. So it suggests what? Jesus has been there for a while. John 14 says, I go to prepare a place for you. When the time is right, I will take you there myself, so that where I am, there you will be also. So Jesus has been there. He's waiting. Jesus said, bring some of the fish you just caught. So Simon Peter climbed back into the boat and dragged the net ashore. It was full of large fish. 1 fish, 2 fish, 3 fish, 153. Two things here. The number, but even with so many fish, the net was not torn. Ooh, remember that. Remember during the call of Peter, what was happening to the net then?
Beginning of
It
terror.
was breaking. It was breaking. All right. What do you think, 153? There's a couple of different theories. Number one, I don't fully understand the first one. Number one, there's some Fibonacci code, or whatever that is from the Da Vinci Code. 1 + 2 and 2 + 3, and there is some sort of a mathematical thing that some geek looked at, and they used all the numbers of the Bible, the 40 and the 12 and the 3 and everything else, and somehow this perfect mathematical combination came up to be 153. I didn't understand it, so I didn't pay much attention to it. I think the second one is probably more plausible. I don't know how they got to this one. But the second theory is that at this time, first century, there were 153 different varieties of fish known. 153. With a suggestion that there's room for everybody in the net. Every kind of ilk, every kind of person, every kind of persuasion, there's room for everybody in this net, not just the Jews. And also, they can all fit in the net. Does the net break? No, net doesn't break. There's room in this. Jesus said, come and have breakfast. I love this part. Now, none of the disciples asked him, who are you? Because they knew it was the Lord. And Jesus came, took the bread, gave thanks, broke it, gave it to the disciples, did the same with the fish. There's some sacramental stuff going on in here. Now, what's this story talk about? On the one thing, it is just the post-resurrection of Jesus, and the disciples see him before he ascends forever. That's one. Go a little bit deeper. A little bit deeper. And there's that images about the sacrament, and about there's room for everybody in there. And I gotta think there's a third one that goes even deeper. They've been toiling all night long and they get skunked. And then, on the break of the new dawn, the new day, Jesus is there, waiting, as they're coming back home. And there he has a place prepared for them. And at that place, Jesus has this meal, so that when they come there, they know that they belong. And nobody has to ask, who are you? Because on that day, when your toil has ended, and you enter into the heavens' new day, the dawn of a new day, the dawn of eternity day, not one of us will have to ask, who are you? Because at that moment you will know. You will just know it's the Lord. Once in a while I got people that say to me, you know, when I get to heaven, I got a couple of questions. I'm going to ask God. I'm going to ask him a couple. Yeah, right. You're going to have such swagger going in through the pearly gates that you're going to call God on the carpet. I think what we're going to do when we get there, the first thing we're going to say is, oh. And that's it. Because all those silly questions we've been holding all these years, they will certainly be answered in a moment. And not one of us will have to ask, who the heck are you? Because having never seen him before, you're just going to know it's the Lord. I think that this is a glimpse of that eternity in which we finally meet him face to face. But this is not the primacy of Peter. The primacy of Peter is next. This is leading up to it. So they're at a little shore lunch. When they had finished eating, Jesus said to Peter, Simon, son of John, do you love me more than these? Yes, Lord, you know that I love you. Jesus said, feed my lambs. Again, Jesus, Simon, son of John, do you love me? He answers, yes, Lord, you know that I love you. Jesus said, take care of my sheep. A third time, Jesus said, Simon, son of John, do you love me? Peter was hurt because Jesus asked him a third time, do you love me? He said, yes, Lord, you know all things, and you know that I love you. And Jesus said, feed my sheep. Let's stop there for just a moment. This is called the primacy of Peter, in which Jesus is setting him apart as a leader of sorts of the disciples. Now, he does go on to become the leader there in Jerusalem, there's a little bit of battle between Peter and James, the brother of Jesus. But really, Peter becomes that leader. Now, in the Catholic Church, of course, that leader has him as the very first pope. But this gets to be the primacy. Why 3 times? I mean, 3 is a really good number, isn't it? That's kind of that, one of those like 12 or 40 that come up. Why 3?
Because the 3 times Peter denied him there in front of Pilate.
Probably giving him 3 times to come clean, 1 for every denial, and he is able to do that before Jesus. It's got to be a humbling thing. Got to be a humbling thing. Now I'm thinking about this. Is this, you go back. Did Peter speak in that last pericope that I just read? He did, didn't he? It was John who said, "It's the Lord." Could it be that this is the last time we have heard Peter speak? Might have been the denial. That would be really cool. The last time we hear anything from his mouth, "Darn it, I do not know that man." 3 times. The next time he speaks, 3 times he says, "Yes, Lord." 18, very truly I tell you, when you were younger, you dressed yourself and went where you wanted, but when you are old, you will stretch out your hands. Someone else will dress you and lead you where you do not want to go. Jesus said this to indicate the kind of death by which Peter would glorify God. And he said, "Follow me." When you are old, you will stretch out your arms. Sounds like a crucifixion, doesn't it? And someone will dress you and lead you where you do not want to go. And sure enough, in the mid-60s, Peter does die on the cross. But do you remember how Peter dies on the cross? Upside down. Because he didn't think he was worthy to be executed the same way as Jesus. So that's the primacy. That's the primacy of Peter. Right after that, we're going to go to the Sermon on the Mount. Isn't that a beautiful setting? This is, I don't know if they know it's this spot or if it's that spot. You know, most of these spots in the Holy Land were determined by who? You know? German Pope, yeah, Dr. Rudolf Bultmann.
Wasn't during the Byzantine Empire that, what was his name?
Before the Byzantine Empire.
Or before, what was the guy's name? He was the ruler.
Yes, Constantine.
Constantine. There we go.
Yes, but it wasn't Constantine. It was his mother, Helen.
Oh,
Helen, in about 300, she went over to the Holy Land. And she was the one who really designated these spots. Now, they could very well have been venerated for 300 years, who knows? Or else they said, yeah, here. Yeah, I think here. Now, when you go to Rome, for instance, you go to Rome and there is one cathedral in there that they have parts of the manger in there that Helen brought back in 300. Now, the skeptic in me wonders, do you think they really kept, first of all, Jesus dies 33 or 35 years later. His popularity doesn't grow until later. Do you think someone really went back there and grabbed him? They could have. But that's what's going on over in the Holy Land. Some of these we know are the sites. Other ones, thanks to Helen. But this is a beautiful sight. And right above it, kind of where you can look into the Sea of Galilee. And by the way, we're going to take a boat ride into Galilee as well. They've got a really, really nice, like a pavilion, like a building that has all the things regarding the Sermon on the Mount. Now, what happens to the Sermon on the Mount? Here it is. Now, the Sermon on the Mount is in 2 of the Gospels, just Matthew and Luke. Now, let me read these, and I want you to tell me the difference between the 2. On Matthew on the left. Now, when Jesus saw the crowd, he went up on a mountainside and sat down. His disciples came to him. He began to teach them. He said, "Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted. Blessed are the meek, for they will inherit the earth. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they will be filled," and so on and so on. Luke's Gospel. Jesus went down with them and stood on a level place. Sermon on the plain, not Sermon on the Mount. A large crowd of people were there, and a great number of people from all of Judea. Looking at his disciples, he said, "Blessed are you who are poor, for yours is the kingdom of God. Blessed are you who hunger now, for you will be satisfied. Blessed are you who weep now, for you will laugh. Blessed are you when people hate you, when they exclude you, when they insult you, and reject your name as evil because of the Son of Man." So one's on the mountain, one's on the plain. What else do you see the difference between the 2? And anybody online can jump in as well.
Well, first one talks about the kingdom of, I guess, the kingdom of heaven, and one says the kingdom of God.
Good. That's the first thing. Kingdom of heaven versus kingdom of God. The big difference there is the author, Matthew. Matthew is a Jew. Luke, we think, Gentile. And Matthew, being a good Jew, would never utter the holy name of God. It just seems so cavalier that these sinful lips would even say the name of God. So these Jewish people would often use Adonai or the Lord, but they wouldn't use the name Yahweh because that's the sacred name of God. So instead of saying the kingdom of God, which Matthew would shudder, says the kingdom of heaven. But Luke, being the Gentile, just says it out. What else do you see? Look at verse 3 in Matthew. Blessed are the poor in spirit. Go down to number 6. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness. Now look at Luke. Blessed are the poor. Blessed are you who hunger. What's the difference?
Luke was a physician, and he's calling out the physical things more than the spiritual things.
Yeah. Again, it's probably the audience to which each are writing. Matthew's writing towards a Jewish audience that is probably better off financially. And so he spiritualizes it. Blessed are those who are poor in spirit, bless their hearts. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, that this world might be right once again. But Luke is writing to really the lowest class of people, the most disenfranchised. He doesn't spiritualize it at all. Blessed are the poor, period. Blessed are those who hunger, period. Give you an example on this. Luke is the only gospel that has the story of Lazarus and the rich man. You remember that story in which Lazarus is hungry And the rich man walks by him, several times a day and does nothing. The rich man dies, goes to hell. Lazarus dies, goes to heaven. And of course, there's some conversation about, can I dip the finger? It's burning. Have Lazarus just give me a little bit of water. My tongue is burning up in hell. And Jesus says, you can't. Once you're in one place or the other, there's no going back. But the point is this, only in Luke's gospel is that story told. And what do we know about Lazarus? This is a different Lazarus, by the way, than the one raised from the dead. What do we know about Lazarus?
He was poor, he was a beggar.
That's all we know about him. There's nothing about faith alone, grace alone. All we know that he is poor. And all we know about the rich man is that he's rich. And so Luke has this preferential treatment to the poor simply because they are poor. That's one of the big differences here. Verse 22 under Luke, blessed are you when people hate you, when they exclude you, they insult you, reject your name as evil because of the Son of Man. So these are people that really are outcasts. Outcasts. And knowing that Jesus was himself an outcast as well. But the Sermon on the Mount does not end with this called the Beatitudes. The Beatitudes. Doesn't end here. It goes on for chapters of all these different sayings of Jesus as he's teaching the crowd on this mountain or plain, one of the two. You see, in Luke's gospel, Jesus goes on not only to bless the poor, but to curse the rich. Now, Matthew doesn't do this because his audience is kind of well off. He doesn't want to do that. So Luke says, but woe to you who are rich, for you have already received your comfort. Woe to you who are well fed now, for you will go hungry. Woe to you who laugh now, for you will mourn and weep. Woe to you when people speak well of you, for that is how their ancestors treated the false prophets. This chasm between the rich and the poor is something that's pretty significant throughout Luke's gospel. Interesting, when the angel comes and visits and announces the birth of Jesus, in Matthew, who does the angel come to? One of two guesses. Joseph, right? Comes to Joseph. And in Luke's gospel, the angel comes to Mary. And then after this announcement, and after with Elizabeth, she launches into song called the Magnificat, about the Lord has done good things to me, and the rich will walk away empty. Another story. Love this one. You have heard that it was said to the people of old, you shall not murder, and anyone who murders will be subject to judgment. And all the Pharisees looked at each other and said, that's right. Yeah. Number 5. Fifth commandment. Never murdered a person in my life. I am righteous beyond inspection. But I tell you that anyone who is angry with a brother or sister will be subject to judgment. Again, anyone who says to a brother or sister, raka, not a swear word, is answerable to the court. And anyone says, you fool, which seems awfully minor to me, you fool, will be in danger of the fires of hell. And the Pharisees look at each other and say, oh no, come on! I haven't murdered anybody. You're telling me that if I call somebody a fool, if I'm angry with somebody, that's the same as murder? And if they're a little bit off balance right now, then And Jesus pushes them just a little bit further. You have heard that it was said, you shall not commit adultery. That's right, that's right. Never done that, that's number 6. We all agree on that. I am righteous beyond inspection. But I tell you that anyone who looks at a woman lustfully has already committed adultery with her in his heart. And they're saying, oh, now come on. Looking doesn't hurt, does it? Ask Jimmy Carter. I remember that, it was with Playboy, I think, wasn't it? I don't know why he agreed to an interview with Playboy as Baptist. But they asked him, you ever committed adultery? He said, yes. And I bet they said, oh, go. He said, in my heart, in my heart. See, what Jesus is doing here is being a really good Lutheran. And this is what Luther talked about with the second use of the law. Of course, the first use of the law is right there. You shall not murder, you shall not commit adultery, you shall not steal, you shall not lie. What part of no don't you understand? But Luther thought that was the lesser of the two. Because you could lull yourself into thinking, I have never killed, never committed adultery, never stolen anything fair. I may covet, but isn't America built on coveting and greed? Isn't that what made America great? But what Luther says is the second use of the law. And that's what Jesus is doing right here. The second use of the law opens up our eyes to realize that I do murder, and I do commit adultery, and I do steal, I do covet, I don't always take God's name perfectly, and I don't always honor the Sabbath day and so on. It is in that opening up our eyes to realize that we are in constant need of God's grace. It's not just when I mess up once in a while. I remember I did a wedding for my cousin years ago, maybe 25 years ago. And it was the Grand Teton Mountains. And we were at this estate of a guy who invented the silicon chip or something, I don't know. Because my cousin's fiance was a venture capitalist, and it was just like, here's the top, it's over the top. It was like 4 days of decadence. But not all bad decadence. I mean, he took all 100 people on a horseback ride into the mountains. There was another parties here. And then there was one day he took everybody on a rafting trip down the river. And Gretchen's home with kids. So, which was a mistake I found out later on by her, when I told her how great it was. But, it's a rafting trip, and it's not like class 4 and 5, it's rivers, right? And so, being the friendly guy that I am, I see a raft that's got an open seat, I jump in there, everybody else knows each other, and get in, we shove off, we introduce each other, and I introduced my last name, which is the same as Jeannie's. They say, oh, you're Jeannie's cousin. You're the pastor, aren't you? I said, yes, I am. I was on a raft with 8 of their Jewish friends from Minneapolis. For the next 2 hours, we had an 8-on-1 conversation. And here was the biggest stumbling point. What do you Christians do all the time that you need so much forgiveness? If I step on somebody's toe, I don't need forgiveness from God. In that instance, I would go to the individual and I would say, I'm sorry for stepping on your toe. And then I am fine until I step on somebody else's toe later on. But you Christians are always talking about forgiveness. What are you doing? And they all agreed that they were really good people. They didn't lie and cheat and steal and commit adultery and murder. And so it's the same kind of conversation here. They had kind of, in my view, lulled themselves into thinking that they were righteous. They were righteous. And they really didn't need that much grace. As I talked about, without using the word second use of the law, as I talked about Jesus opening up our eyes and realizing that murder and adultery are the same and so on, it was, I got nowhere. I got nowhere.
That's real.
They didn't throw me out. I think we eventually changed the subject. Maybe because it was hitting home. Because if lusting and if getting angry, if calling somebody a fool is just as bad doing it, well then maybe I do need more forgiveness than that. So this is where Luther gets his really teaching of that second use of the law. This and some other places as well. It goes on, it says, if your right eye causes you to stumble, gouge it out. Throw it away. It's better for you to lose one part of your body than for the whole body to be thrown into hell. And if your right hand causes you to stumble, cut it off, throw it away. It's better for you to lose one part of your body than for your whole body to go to hell. Whenever somebody says to me, you know, I take the Bible literally. It is literally true. I say, you do not. You do not. And not too very many real people who say that, because there's not a whole lot of one-handed, one-eyed Christians out there. This is a good example that of hyperbole, right? It's just a hyperbole. Is the truth found in its historicity? That is, Jesus was commanded to cut off their hand? And no, the truth is found that heaven is so important above anything else that if anything is in your way, get rid of it. Because the ultimate goal is the ultimate goal. In our Lutheran understanding, well, there's a lot of different words that people use to describe the authority of Scripture. Literal, what else do they use?
Inspired.
Inspired. There's two more.
Scripture.
No. Infallible. The word that's often used is inerrant. Inerrant. That is probably, the Missouri Synod uses that term, inerrant. And a lot of the PCA uses inerrant as well. The word inerrant means without error. And when you push people on, what does that mean? Well, it means that the Bible contains no errors. And then you pick up the obvious, like, well, who is there at the resurrection? You've got four completely different accounts. Mary Magdalene probably, okay, she made the cut. But sometimes she's alone, sometimes Peter's there with. And their response, if you find any errors in Scripture, the response is, in its original form, it was without error. And what's the difficulty of that argument? We don't have any original documents. We have copies of copies of copies of copies. And so it's an argument that cannot be proven, because we don't have any autographed copies of Matthew. When you push them those who say literal or inerrant, inspired or infallible, when you push them and say, what does that mean to you? And you can't use the word inerrant, infallible, literal, inspired. What does that word mean to you? They will say something like, we believe the Bible is the final authority of matters of faith and life. All other authors, either contemporary or ancient, are not to be held on par with Scripture. And I will say to them, see, you're Lutheran. You just don't know it. I can get every Protestant to realize they're Lutheran, because that's part of our confessional writings. The Bible is the final authority of matters of faith and life.
Sounds like the catechism. Or second Timothy 3:16, all scripture is God breathed.
Yep. God breathed, and that literally is the word inspired. Inspired means God breathed. So it doesn't mean that Matthew, Mark, Luke, and Paul were just kind of inspired as you're inspired sitting on a mountaintop and looking over and going to paint a picture. I'm inspired. No, it's God breathed. It's different. Now, the only difficulty with that text, the only difficulty, is what was Paul referring to when he wrote that? Old Testament, right? Because the New Testament was not written yet. And so when he says all scripture is inspired, we like to say that means our canonical Bible. Paul probably was not reading that. But he makes a good point, though. He makes a good point. So this is a good point, that we don't take it literally. But the truth is still within. The truth is still within. Let's see if there's any more. You have heard it said, an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth. Where's that? That's in the Old Testament. That's the Old Testament, in which there's a very specific listing of punishments. Eye for an eye, tooth for, that makes sense, you know? And then if you kill, my heifer, I need 2 of your steers or whatever else. They've got a pretty clear kind of punishment here. Eye for an eye, tooth for tooth. And they're all looking at each other and they're saying, yeah, that's right. I agree with that, 100%. But I tell you, do not resist an evil person. If anyone slaps you on the right cheek, turn to them the other cheek also. If anyone wants to sue you and take your shirt, hand them your coat as well. If anyone forces you to go 1 mile, go with them 2 miles. Give to the one who asks you, and do not turn away from the one who wants to borrow from you. Is Jesus really telling us that we need to be a doormat? Keep on hitting me. Keep on hitting me. Is Jesus really saying that if anyone wants to sue you, just give them everything? Give them more than they're asking? Is Jesus really saying if anybody forces you to do one thing, go way, way above and beyond it? Probably not. So on a very surface level, what is this teaching suggesting? Don't retaliate, anger for anger, punch for punch? Maybe. That we as Christians are going to be known not as a litigious community, but one that settled early, amicably? Maybe. That could be at a very surface level. But if we go a little bit deeper, again, the details matter, right, Tal?
Absolutely.
All right. So, if anyone slaps you on the right cheek, now how am I going to hit Terry? I'm right-handed. Most people are right-handed. If I'm going to hit you on your right cheek, what do I got to do? I got to go like this? That's kind of weird. How's the only way I can hit Terry on the right cheek?
backhand. And who you backhand in the first century? Women, slaves, children, inferiors. Jesus said, if you're gonna hit me, right here, on the left cheek, like a man, I'm an equal to you. And don't treat me as an inferior. There's some civil disobedience going on with this. The second one, if anyone wants to sue you, take your shirt, hand over your coat as well. How many pieces of clothing do they have? You want my shirt? Take my shirt. Guess what? Guess what? Take it all. And it's not shame on me, shame on you. There's some civil disobedience going on right here. As you walk away from the courtroom, say, look at it. He just took everything from me. If anyone forces you to go 1 mile, go with them 2 miles. Now, this is what I was taught about this text. That any Roman centurion, any Roman soldier could come up to any Jew, throw his pack on his back, and say, follow me for 1 mile. You could ask any Jew to carry your stuff for 1 mile. Jesus is saying, grab it. Go 1 mile, go past the mile marker, say, I'll do another mile, go past the second mile marker, go to the centurion and say, listen, I've been carrying his pack for 2 miles now. What do you think of that, centurion? And suddenly now the soldier is the one who gets in trouble. It's some civil disobedience going on with this text. And of course, Jesus knows something about not obeying all the laws of the land and being a civil disobedient himself when they tell him not to teach and not to preach. There are ways in which we can stand up when all the power forces are against us.
Another way I look at this is the earthly, godly thing. What really happens here on earth is earthly, and we need to put our treasures in heaven.
Do not be concerned about the things of this world.
Correct.
I think this is more earthly than that.
Well, it is.
I think this is how are we going to treat one another as equal people of dignity and respect. All right, that was that final day last week that we finally completed. And then we get to have a fish dinner at Peter's Fish and Grub, or fish and stuff, all right?
Sounds like
After breakfast, we drive through the Jordan Valley onto Bethlehem to visit the shepherd's field, where the angels appeared to the shepherds announcing the birth of the Lord. All right, so you got your map? You got your map? I want to show the map here so that people online can see it. Here it is. Oh, come on. Control. There it is. All right. Oh, come on.
It's thinking.
Oh, I have to stop sharing. And now I have to pick up this one. Now go here. Come on. Share screen. There it is. All right. So where we're going now, I'm going to blow this up a little bit. We've just been around here, the Lake of Tiberias, the same as Galilee. Capernaum up here. Sermon on the Mount down here, Peter's primacy. Now we're going down the river, Jordan River Valley, right here. It's not that far
Here's the, how far is that? 120 kilometers, maybe a little bit more, maybe 200 kilometers times 6, 72 miles. It's not that far of a drive. So this Jordan River Valley is probably one of the few areas that is really green because of that small creek that goes down. It's called the Jordan River. Right, so we're going to be going down here and we're going over to Bethlehem. See it right there? Bethlehem. Which is, well, there's Bethlehem. It's really next to Jerusalem. We're going to take a look at Bethlehem. Back down to 40. Here it is. All right. There's Bethlehem. Isn't that pretty? Taken at night. Just want to make you sing, huh? Oh, little town of Bethlehem. How still. We've got some churches there. And it looks very kind of, I don't know, Middle Eastern, doesn't it? With the, it doesn't look like Florence with all the red tile roofs all over. It looks very, Middle East. This is Christmas Lutheran Church in Bethlehem. And we'll be visiting Christmas Lutheran Church. Does it say it right there too? No, it is Christmas Lutheran Church. So that'll be a big pilgrimage for us. But coming into Bethlehem, remember Bethlehem is the West Bank. Bethlehem is really controlled by the Palestinian Authority. And so the Israelis then have built a wall around it. So leading up to it, it's very tenuous. You know, that you would have to stop and go, you have to go through Checkpoint Charlie, and they check all the passports and everything else. And you see the wall here, goes all the way around. And the wall is full of graffiti. And the graffiti then is really some angry things about this Israeli-Palestinian situation that's going on there. While we're there, we're going to go into this little chapel. This is located at the Shepherd of the Fields. This is where the angels appeared to announce the birth of Jesus. And so inside here, it is very, it's like singing in your bathtub, shower. You know, how we say it sounds so much better in there? Because we're going to be in there, and probably with some other pilgrims as well, and we'll sing Christmas carols together. We might bring along, you know, probably find some on our phone or whatever else, but we'll sing it together, and it's just beautiful. We'll have 45 of us singing right there in the shepherd's field. Glory to God in the highest and peace to his people on earth. It's really a moving experience right in this place. Bethlehem. And I broke that name intentionally that way. Beth, or it's called Beit, in Hebrew means house. Bethel, El, whenever you see El is God. So Bethel is the house of God. And Bethlehem is a bread, house of bread. Because Bethlehem was always just a small, nothing, humble little place. Remember Micah 5:1 says, "But you, O Bethlehem, though you're the least of these, from you shall come forth the King, the Messiah." So Bethlehem, Bethlehem.
And we'll go through more of the details of that later. Okay? Next week, we'll be talking more, no, next week, we're gonna have the JCC person, Noah. And Noah's gonna tell us all the up-to-date things going on over in Israel. All right, thanks for joining us online. And make sure you join us. There should be a great conversation next week with the Jewish Community Center. All right, we'll see ya.